Jesus be honored, must be honored. Jesus must be honored in my life every day. Jesus must be honored, must be honored, must be honored. Jesus must be honored in my life every day. Said many years have come and gone since this Jesus was crucified, but we still gather round unto him who died for us. There remained no more sacrifice, there remained no more rituals. What could be bigger than the death of the Son of God at Calvary? In the morning let us honor him, every time let us honor Emmanuel. Glory, hallelujah, to the Lamb on the throne. Everybody say, Jesus must be honored, must be honored, must be honored. Jesus must be honored in my life every day. And when we come to December, this is one thing we always remember. Merry, merry, merry Christmas and a happy New Year. So when we come to December, this is one thing we always remember. Merry, merry, merry Christmas and a happy New Year. So happy birthday to Jesus. Happy birthday to you, Emmanuel. Merry, merry, merry Christmas and a happy New Year. 2,000 years and 20 have gone, and we still gather round the King of Kings. Merry, merry, merry Christmas and a happy New Year.
Okay.
Who stopped the music?
No one did. It's just needed to stop. Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily.
This is one thing we are.
26th today in the month of December 2022. I almost said welcome.
2026? It's a music. I know. It does that to you. It's a beautiful Boxing Day morning. Welcome to the show. What? I'm Kayode Okikilu. You can tell I'm excited. Definitely.
So happy
So
birthday.
if my face was looking a little hard initially, it was because somebody stopped the music. You know,
Exactly,
I think
exactly.
it's divided now. Good morning and welcome. And Merry Christmas to you and Maope Ogun Yusuf.
Well, it's only natural that today we go in this direction. So at least you know that we're also not out of the function of the fact that it's a season to be jolly. And most certainly something that we need at this time. Well, generally, all over the world, the theme of Christmas is always that of peace and joy. And what better to wish Nigeria at this time as we pilot our ways into 2023 for the next general elections in our fourth republic. We can't still call it an experiment, can we? But it's Christmas season, and definitely a time for us to, if we can, look away from all of our problems and for once just rejoice. Just be happy, just be at peace for once. We need it, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think that's the essence of joy. What is joy? Really, when you look at it, what is joy without sorrow, sadness? That's why you need joy. So when you say joy to the world, I think sometimes it's maybe just half of the story. Because maybe before the world, you should have maybe joy to a sorrowful world, or joy to a sad world, joy to a world in turmoil, because that's the sense of joy. There will never be a need for joy if there wasn't all of those, down feelings, sadness, war, and all of that. And I think a lot of people can use that joy this morning. I mean, around you. And I think that's the essence of the whole season, joy to the world. Not joy to you alone, it's joy to the world. So you're essentially meant to take out that joy out there. There are a lot of people who are mourning right now. Yes, I know it's a time to rejoice, but as I said, it's essentially a point to take that joy and you know, get it to the people who really need them. Yes, we could all do with a little joy, depending on what you're going through. Imagine the people in southern Kaduna who are mourning right now. They need all of that joy, and this is a good time to actually reach out to them amidst all of the mourning and all. Family of my late friend, Peteru, the comedian, for example, and people who have lost loved ones, they need all of that joy. So this is just a challenge. When you say joy to the world, essentially we should actually act all of that out. So look for people who need joy today, because those are the recipients of that statement, joy to the world.
Should I be adding anything to that? Because essentially, both of you have summarized the message. I think the only thing left to add to that is to wish all of us well, to thank those who are currently providing that joy in so many ways. You know, a lot of us are on holidays in this season, and I'm sure that's why we're here, to ensure that you have something to watch at least while you're on holiday with your family. That is, if you're with your family. If you're not, it's okay. Wherever it is that they are, or if you're yet to have a family, or if you have an extended family, you know, joy to you all. For those who are who have to be at work in this season, and that's the reason why they have to be away from their families. For instance, the medical personnel will have to be in hospitals providing essential services, you know, keeping lives intact, making sure that newborns are protected, making sure that mothers deliver safely, making sure that, you know, those who are there for no fault of theirs, even for those who are there for fault of theirs, you know, that they get the best medical attention. Shall we say thank you to them for bringing joy where it is that you have found your work. For those who are ensuring that this country is safe, regardless of the many misses that we have, who are still keeping at their jobs and still trying to find joy and spread it while at it. Thank you for doing your job. So what shall we say? Joy to the world. It's Merry Christmas. Thank you all for being with us all of these years. Merry Christmas to you.
Well, no doubt the Christmas season is not just going to go away without, what do we call it now, Boxing Day? Well, historically, Boxing Day is for, no, not gloves, sharing gifts. So you have something in the region of maybe 1,000 contacts on your phone, whichever number of people you have on your contact list. How about extending a hand of love to someone this morning? Call someone, share some love with them. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you mean something to them, even if it's a text message. Sometimes it's something I do randomly. I could just pick up my phone and call someone I haven't called in about 6 months, 7 months, 5 months, 4 months, or send a message out of the blue, and the person's going to be like, hey, what's going on here? What do you need? I don't need anything. I just wanted to let you know that I care. And, you know, those such things. How are you laughing? Does it hit home?
You know, I mean, it's just the mentality usually. When you get a message, you want to ask, go straight to the point. I get that point, but really, no strings attached. Just a checkup.
So please, extend a hand of love to someone. It is important to their mental health, because you don't know what people are going through at this time. So Merry Christmas to you and your loved ones. We switch to the papers and hope to find some joy on the front pages this morning. I think I have something to share on the front page of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Well, Cardi nailed it the other time when he said, you can't have joy, can't appreciate joy without a history or a background of sorrow. But 60 days to 2023 polls you find on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. INEC offices fortified with heavy security. I'll say that's something to cheer.
Indeed.
The riders, security operatives guard missions facilities nationwide. Arsonists burn 500 generating sets in Anambra. CSOs task government on security as INEC begs voters to collect PVCs. We're joining INEC this morning to beg you, CSOs this morning to beg you to collect your PVCs. Okay? I was told, though, that I should come after Christmas. Well, it's after Christmas now, but I know that today is a public holiday.
This is just after. I mean, what they meant is after Christmas, because there's still another public holiday.
No, they said after Christmas.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go after Christmas. They didn't say come in the new year. That's
No,
clear.
there's still like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's what the after Christmas means, not today after Christmas, which is
Well,
Boxing
it is
Day.
after Christmas, right? But it's public holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So it's understandable. So it's after Christmas.
Anyway, so that's what you have on the front page. Most certainly something to cheer. I don't know if we can say the same thing for that story right above the nameplate, right under the nameplate, beg your pardon. Nigeria missing in 12 most advanced African countries list. Question you want to ask is why? And I read a quote this morning from an official of NIPRID who says, look, Nigeria has all the mental infrastructure, the human capacity and everything to produce drugs and vaccines, but the infrastructure to support that is absent in the country. That's certainly something very, very worrisome.
And I think it just ties to this report is said to be by, what, Insider Monkey, titled 12 Most Advanced Countries in Africa. And it talks about using resources, natural resources, to actually develop the economy. I mean, we all know just how vast our natural resources are. I'm not even talking human capital, because that's on another level entirely.
Let's separate that.
Let's separate that, right? On another level, yes, they're meant to work together to boost our economy. But clearly, it looks like this report is saying we've not been able to use all of that. We're not where we ought to be.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, we can say we're the biggest economy in Africa, largest economy, one of the top in the world in terms of our GDP. But is that where we ought to be with all of the resources we have? Clearly, no. So maybe to that extent, I would agree with this one, because I know that we all know, I think it's something we all gather to say from time to time, that no, Nigeria we don't deserve to be where we are right now. So to that extent, I would agree with it, because clearly we shouldn't be at this level, honestly.
One of the resources you're talking about, the mineral resources you are talking about, is something that many people don't even know that we have. And we have one of the largest deposits, if not the largest deposit in the world, is gum arabic. And gum arabic, just Google it.
Yeah.
Gum arabic, find out the things that the resource
use it for.
do,
Yeah.
and you'll be amazed. And we hear all sorts. Petroleum that we're talking about, the byproducts of petroleum alone, of the byproducts of crude oil alone, can run the economy.
No, we do a swap most times, so crude oil for petrol, and that's it. So.
And it's a huge loss. It's a huge loss on very, very many levels. So there is hardly any state in the country that does not have huge deposits of mineral resources that can sustain the economy of that state.
Naturally.
Why we don't have it? Well, I guess it only puts the leadership need to question. Right above the nameplate, Osinbajo preaches mercy, grace at Christmas. Well, he's a clergyman, vice president. And right beside that story, you have Kuka to PMB. You are leaving Nigeria more vulnerable, corrupt. Well, not something to cheer, but hey, you need to go into the speech of the cleric to know exactly what he's saying, because, as media men, we pick on what we want, right? Let's leave it there for the Leadership newspaper this morning.
I mean, you can't remove the fact that some of these things are backed by data. So, I mean,
certainly.
Whether or not you like it, the data should be speaking. And I imagine all of the parties should come and say, well, this is it. This is, except you can't defend it anyway. But take a look at Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust is next on our lineup this Boxing Day, and it leads with sort of advice on our natural resources. We're back again at that point. How next government can reposition Nigeria's oil industry. Yep. If you know about that industry, you know just how liquid, and I mean in terms of crude oil and in terms of the other liquid it can be.
Both pun and no pun intended.
Absolutely. So yeah, maybe an advice we need for Boxing Day while you're unboxing all of the boxes and...
Well, that's definitely something that God has, the creation has boxed for us.
Honestly.
But we haven't unboxed all of it, right?
Gosh.
We haven't unboxed
At all.
Even the ones we unboxed, we seem to put them back in.
Or in the box, right? Or just not prioritize it, just toss it away.
Agriculture, for instance, over the years, see what we've done with it or not done with it.
I like that theme for Boxing Day. Unboxing Nigeria's. Oh, we'll take a look at the riders for Daily Trust. Separate president from petroleum minister. That's coming from Professor Ledari. Regulatory clarity necessary. Prioritize competence. We need to build local capacity. That's coming from an economist. I don't know if that local capacity means local refineries, but I mean, it would be out of place.
Well, I haven't read the story, but I would expect that that would be in the
feature
mix, because, for God's sake, I mean, don't blame those in the holy books who, when they laid the foundation of the temple again, you know, later on in the Old Testament, the old people said, what are you guys? They just laid the foundation of this new one, and you people are happy. You should see what we had
in the past, right?
The real temple of Solomon. You people should see it. So there are those who would look back in time and say, man, when Nigeria first discovered oil and there was the oil boom, we built refineries and things were going on well. That was what made subsidy, you know, because, hey,
we had a lot anyway.
Government had so much money.
Yes.
The government of the day said, we don't even know what to do with it.
Well, I'm all for diversifying as well. So yes, we need to pay attention to the oil industry, but there's other oils, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Other oils around, and we need to actually pay equal attention to them. There are some low-hanging fruit, as we say. So yeah, I mean, we just need to be systematic about this one. It's a sad one. Just on top of that big one, 14 killed in Bauchi, Kaduna, Ogun auto accidents. So imagine that during this Yuletide. It's a really sad one.
On Friday, we had this conversation with the FRSC sector commander in Lagos, and he gave counsel on things that people should look out for. It'll be good to know what, and of course, he delineated the differences between accidents and crashes. So look, an accident is something you don't know will happen. But a crash is something you try to avoid to make sure it didn't happen, but you didn't. There was nothing you could have done. So if we were able to do the things that we should have done, speed within the limits,
fix the roads, put proper signs, proper demarcations, ensure that, I mean, there's a whole list, and I do hope that in all of those, you know, findings, there's some recommendations made to government, and I mean, tell the government the truth that these are the things that caused the crash. Perhaps some pothole on the road, some sign that was not obvious, happens. Some demarcation and all of that. Yes, vehicle faults, we can talk about that, but I mean, we should all look at this holistically, I imagine. I need to talk about the experience of travelers on the Lagos Ibadan rail service. I mean, imagine people having to stand in the train, some having to sit on the floor in the train, and they paid the 3,600 naira for the ticket.
Is that supposed to mean there was an overload?
Yes, naturally there will be I mean, naturally it's a period. But people should know that, hey, it is full. So it should be by consent. Some people didn't even know. They just realized someone was sitting on their seat, and they went there, and the person told them, the person sitting there said, well, someone else is sitting on my seat. So imagine the whole commotion.
NRC better come out and
absolutely.
Say
and it's really sad, honestly, and I think this should not sour the moment, but NRC should sort this out. Imagine people sitting on the floor in a train. But you know what? Let's move on. There's a couple of other stories on the Daily Trust. It's Boxing Day, so there's a picture of children enjoying the Yuletide. Absolutely. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust. Mark.
The picture of people sitting on the train is not hard for me to paint, Coyote. That's our fault. That's also the fault of the NRC, because sometimes, you know, we're told that the service is full and people will just be adamant But, you know, it is the job of the NRC to put its foot down, to be able to say, you know, we're not doing 10 standing or 100 standing, 10 sitting. That is not what we're looking to see on our new trains. We're hoping that it will be run as a standard. Did you just mention Ibadan? I wanted to say not as a Dugbe service, but hey, excuse me, what do I know? What do I know? I don't mean to throw any shade at Ayo this weekend. He had an overdose of love from Ibadan on Sunrise on Saturday. And I also enjoyed all of the music coming on the program on Sunrise on Saturday as well. But hey, I think that the NRC, if they're watching this morning, should take this as feedback. It is the rush season. People will say, oh, it doesn't matter. We can stand. I don't mind. If you decide that you want to stand and the NRC is willing to sell you tickets, then please, by all means, make sure that those people who buy standing tickets, in quote, are standing somewhere you have designated, not on the seat for those who came on time or who booked early, you know, and are sitting down. The same thing, I mean, the airlines sometimes do it when there is some confusion. They will say, oh, it's a free sitting, they call it. But they make sure that it do not take more than the number of people that the aircraft can carry. So if you decide that it is free sitting, for instance, and then make sure that the train is not taking more than the number of people that it is designated to take. Excuse me. The Hamatan here has just been very unkind to my voice box, but hey, it'll get better. The rains will be here in no time. Let's enjoy the gold, and we'll see how we can deal with the dust that comes with it. I'm looking at Nigerian News. Nigerian News Direct for you this morning. I have a little challenge, a small, no, what I mean challenge, I don't mean problems now, but like I want to see, you know, how many positive stories will be on the front pages this morning. If I ran a newspaper outfit or a news organization, I think that for days like this, for holiday periods, I will certainly look for an abundance of positive stories. And I see that, you know, even though the story is very serious, at least it's depicting what we are doing on our own side. It says NAF airstrike kills over 100 terrorists in one day, attributed to a spokesman of, I imagine, the Nigerian Air Force. It says terrorist kingpins Khalid Tukur, May Musari, Bakura, Jega neutralized. Neutralization now seems to be the new word for killed, at least within military circles. So it's not always good for everybody. It's good for some people, and then it's bad for some people. This kind of headline. So it's bad for the terrorists, and it's good for us. That song, as they sweet them, as they sweet us, you'll be paining some people. As I said earlier, I prayed this prayer some time ago. May you always be on the winning side. May our troops always be on the winning side. May Nigeria always be on the winning side. Look at this as well. Abiodun acknowledges Nigeria's challenges, says better days ahead. That story is somewhere inside the paper for you. One more positive story here. NDLEA intercepts Colorado cannabis juice consignment at Lagos Airport Seaport. Yes, we always get this news. On Sundays, the news from the NDLEA always comes in on Sundays. It's almost like a weekly press release, which you now expect to see on Sundays, and then you see it in the papers on Monday. So they haven't let their guard down. If the people who think that they can smuggle these things can do it in this season because it's the Christmas holidays, I think the NDLEA begs to disagree. Christmas or not, we are doing our jobs and we will nab you. That seems to be the story that they are sending. Take a look at this one. There's still a squabble going on. Used vehicles. Oyetola is not in possession of 11 vehicles. That's according to his aide. And just in case you're wondering, look at this. You're a patriot, service-oriented leader. Jonathan Hales Makinde at 55. Oh, yeah, that's the picture you see there, the governor of Oyo State. Hey, see why I didn't want to throw any shade at Ibadan. The governor of Oyo State is celebrating his birthday in this season. So happy birthday to him. And then look at the last story. We see the EFCC wins 2022 Servicom Award as best parastatal for service delivery. Okay, so if Servicom is the one doing awards, how does it happen? I mean, it would be very interesting to find out how it happens, because I always imagined that Servicom was the one to ensure that we got very good service delivery. So maybe they're looking at parastatals with the least complaints, or what? I don't know what the criteria will be, but just in case you're interested, like I might be, you might flip, looking for the page now, to page 2 of the Nigerian News Direct to find out by what parameters the EFCC won best parastatal for service delivery. We'll leave it there for Nigerian News Direct. No harm was done, Ibadan, in the process of doing newspaper review.
Lovely.
It's like, is that like you're reporting that, okay, you're signing out now and this is the report that you have for what you have done? Well, don't worry. Ibadan people have a signature. Don't let it come your way. Well, we'll take a short break now, and we will be looking at the first topic for the day. 2023 is still ahead of us. What's to come? What must we prepare for as we pray and celebrate? Stay with us.
This is what they call 21st century. When my customer say I want to use POS, I will just bring out my phone, open the application, use this, press this code. I don't have anyone that using POS anymore.
Peace and progress, unity and faith. Those are the words you will find on the Nigerian coat of arms. And those are some of the things that you would want to expect from anyone who would lead you in the country. Isn't that it? Well, it's Christmas season, but we're not losing sight of the fact that we have a job to do to, rather than use the word elect, say appoint, say recruit, employ the next set of Nigerians into leadership positions in both secular, especially in politics in the year ahead. So let's discuss how we all can improve the leadership recruitment process, entrenching leadership that engenders national development, sustained peace and economic progress as we pilot towards 2023. Dr. Taiwo Ojo joins us this morning. He is a strategic leadership consultant and CEO, Kish Global Consultants. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Along with Dr. Toye Shobande, who is a strategic leadership specialist, member, International Leadership Association. He's a leadership consultant with Stevens Leadership Consultancy. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Shobande.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Well, Dr. Joe, let's begin with you. For me, every time we have to discuss leadership, the first thing that I'm asking is the direction. There can be no leader without a trajectory.
Yeah.
Maybe we begin from there.
Okay.
Do you see a national trajectory into which we need to employ someone to pilot the affairs of the country?
Thank you for having me. Once again, I want to wish all Nigerians a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2023. Leadership is a big deal, you know, especially in our country, Nigeria, and even within the African continent. When they say leadership, what do you do? Leadership, what is your work? What do you want to achieve? You know, because Nigeria, at least for a while that I've been following the political terrain, we are too fixated on elections, you know, every 4 years, 8 years, putting hope on human beings to solve our problem. There's nothing bad in that, but what is our leadership selection process? What is our leadership recruitment process? You know, anybody can be brought to speak on leadership, no problem. But the core essence of leadership is two things: trust and results. if you are in leadership position and you are not solving people's problem, you are not in leadership.
Which is why I asked that question. Just a second, Dr. Ojo. Is there a national trajectory towards which Nigeria is going, and consequently we need leaders to help to lead us in that direction?
Yes, there is. Because when you look back, when we started the democratic experiment in 1999, what we are, at least how many years now, 23 years, we've been making progress. But sometimes, because human nature tends to be a bit not showing gratitude to things that are working, especially in the context of our culture, we dwell mostly on negatives, on things that are emotional. You know, politics is very emotional. People, I hardly discuss politics with people.
When you say things that are emotional
that affect you, because you're putting your hope on someone to solve your problem. Why you yourself?
Someone or the country?
Someone will lead a country. A country does not just come. When Singapore came, their leaders, you know, people came in, they grew their leaders from within and also outside the country to come and help their nation. So where we are today, we are making progress. Things might be a bit slow because we put our emphasis basically on our economic well-being, the security, which are the two major issues that we are facing now. The insecurity, which is tied to the economy. Globally, there are issues everywhere. Inflationary pressure. You know, I was listening to Pope Francis yesterday when he was talking about the world is going through the famine of peace. You know, we peace and progress. We look back to the Ukrainian-Russian war that started in February this year. The most important reason of that war is basically because of one word, because of the word I. Self, you know, ego, power. And anywhere you see human beings, we hardly handle power well.
Okay. Let me ask Dr. Shobande the same question. Perhaps he agrees or not with you. Well, Dr. Shobande, you've heard Dr. Ojo, and you are both strategic leadership consultants. Perhaps there is, perhaps you concur or disagree, that there is a national trajectory towards which Nigeria is headed, and we need to employ a leader to lead the country towards that direction.
Yes. I don't agree that there is a national trajectory. I can't feel it. I can't see it. It's not documented anywhere for you and I to relate to. And what I think of is, what is the measurement standard if there is an existing trajectory? It's a common language on the Nigerian street. We don't know where this country is going. It communicates the lack of understanding of this so-called trajectory that we are talking about. Apart from the fact that it's on the street, we hear it, read it in the newspapers every day, that where there is so much commotion and disorder is an indication of lack of trajectory. Where the structure and the institutions that should protect the trajectory are themselves failing, it's an indication that there is no trajectory. Where the custodians of justice, where people can run to the courts to get justice, is an indication there is no trajectory for measuring the direction we are heading. Where our institution is not only failing at the regulatory level, but also at the orientation level, particularly our educational institutions, with several months of ASUU strike, destinies of young people being ruined, lives being wasted, just because and it's a recurring issue over the years.
But Dr. Shobande, while all the things that you said are valid, you can't fault the fact that in 23 years, we have had an unbroken democratic experience, which is a first in all of our democratic experiences in the country. I mean, that perhaps points to the progress that Dr. Ojo mentioned.
I was heading somewhere when I started that statement. Okay. While we had ventured into practicing or an attempt to practice democracy, we have not yet even complete the spelling of the word democracy, let alone practice it. So we don't still have what people generally know as democracy. What we still have, we are still going through the nascent process. And I use that word deliberately because the institutions in which democratic structures are founded are non-existent. Let's start with the political party structure. The political party in Nigeria today, how are they funded? Who is funding them? Where do they get their sources of funding from? Such that we can audit their financial reports. Then we can begin to ask about the democratic process within those political parties on how candidates are elected, on how candidates are selected, that they will present for the nation to pick or select from. That is still an issue. As long as that is still an issue, then we have not yet perfected that democratic structure of electing people from a credible system. Our court is still barred with cases, myriad of cases and petitions within political parties, not even talking about the elections itself. So all of that is going on, and that cannot clearly communicate that we have perfected our act of progress ahead. You can have motion and not have movement. They are two different things. And progress can be relative, depending on who is defining what progress is and depending on the parameters in which the person is defining the progress.
Right. Okay. Indeed.
So, we must have made progress with
New Year, with God on our side, no matter how and whatever may be the negative forecast of people. We know that God who goes ahead of us, He will make the crooked place straight, He will make the rough edges smooth, He will level the mountains and elevate the valleys.
The central message for Christians, according to the Vice President, is that Christ's death has brought a new covenant which comes with hope for Nigerians.
Peace and progress, unity and faith. Those are the words you will find on the Nigerian coat of arms. And those are some of the things that you would want to expect from anyone who would lead you in the country. Isn't that it? Well, it's Christmas season, but we're not losing sight of the fact that we have a job to do to, rather than use the word elect, say appoint, say recruit, employ the next set of Nigerians into leadership positions in both secular, especially in politics in the year ahead. So let's discuss how we all can improve the leadership recruitment process, entrenching leadership that engenders national development, sustained peace and economic progress as we pilot towards 2023. Dr. Taiwo Ojo joins us this morning. He is a strategic leadership consultant and CEO, Kish Global Consultants. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Along with Dr. Toye Shobande, who is a strategic leadership specialist, member, International Leadership Association. He's a leadership consultant with Stevens Leadership Consultancy. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Shobande.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Well, Dr. Joe, let's begin with you. For me, every time we have to discuss leadership, the first thing that I'm asking is the direction. There can be no leader without a trajectory.
Yeah.
Maybe we begin from there.
Okay.
Do you see a national trajectory into which we need to employ someone to pilot the affairs of the country?
Thank you for having me. Once again, I want to wish all Nigerians a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2023. Leadership is a big deal, you know, especially in our country, Nigeria, and even within the African continent. When they say leadership, what do you do? Leadership, what is your work? What do you want to achieve? You know, because Nigeria, at least for a while that I've been following the political terrain, we are too fixated on elections, you know, every 4 years, 8 years, putting hope on human beings to solve our problem. There's nothing bad in that, but what is our leadership selection process? What is our leadership recruitment process? You know, anybody can be brought to speak on leadership, no problem. But the core essence of leadership is two things: trust and results. If you are in leadership position and you are not solving people's problem, you are not in leadership.
Which is why I asked that question. Yep. Just a second, yep. Dr. Ojo. Is there a national trajectory towards which Nigeria is going, and consequently we need leaders to help to lead us in that direction?
Yes, there is. Because when you look back, when we started the democratic experiment in 1999, what we are, at least how many years now, 23 years, we've been making progress. But sometimes, because human nature tends to be a bit not showing gratitude to things that are working, especially in the context of our culture, we dwell mostly on negatives, on things that are emotional. You know, politics is very emotional. People, I hardly discuss politics with people.
When you say things that are emotional,
that affects you, because you're putting your hope on someone to solve your problem. Why you yourself?
Someone or the country?
Someone will lead a country. A country does not just come. When Singapore came, their leaders, you know, people came in, they grew their leaders from within and also outside the country to come and help their nation. So where we are today, we are making progress. Things might be a bit slow because we put our emphasis basically on our economic well-being, the security, which are the two major issues that we are facing now. The insecurity, which is tied to the economy. Globally, there are issues everywhere. Inflationary pressure. You know, I was listening to Pope Francis yesterday when he was talking about the world is going through the famine of peace. You know, we peace and progress. We look back to the Ukrainian-Russian war that started in February this year. The most important reason of that war is basically because of one word, because of the word I. Self, you know, ego, power. And anywhere you see human beings, we hardly handle power well.
Okay. Let me ask Dr. Shobande the same question. Perhaps he agrees or not with you. Well, Dr. Shobande, you've heard Dr. Ojo, and you are both strategic leadership consultants. Perhaps there is, perhaps you concur or disagree, that there is a national trajectory towards which Nigeria is headed, and we need to employ a leader to lead the country towards that direction.
Yes. I don't agree that there is a national trajectory. I can't feel it. I can't see it. It's not documented anywhere for you and I to relate to. And what I think of is, what is the measurement standard if there is an existing trajectory? It's a common language on the Nigerian street. We don't know where this country is going. It communicates the lack of understanding of this so-called trajectory that we are talking about. Apart from the fact that it's on the street, we hear it, read it in the newspapers every day, that where there is so much commotion and disorder is an indication of lack of trajectory. Where the structure and the institutions that should protect the trajectory are themselves failing, it's an indication that there is no trajectory. Where the custodians of justice, where people can run to the courts to get justice, is an indication there is no trajectory for measuring the direction we are heading. Where our institution is not only failing at the regulatory level, but also at the orientation level, particularly our educational institutions, with several months of ASUU strike, destinies of young people being ruined, lives being wasted, just because and it's a recurring issue over the years.
But Dr. Shobande, while all the things that you said are valid, you can't fault the fact that in 23 years, we have had an unbroken democratic experience, which is a first in all of our democratic experiences in the country. I mean, that perhaps points to the progress that Dr. Ojo mentioned.
I was heading somewhere when I started that statement. Okay. While we had ventured into practicing or an attempt to practice democracy, we have not yet even complete the spelling of the word democracy, let alone practice it. So we don't still have what people generally know as democracy. What we still have, we are still going through the nascent process. And I use that word deliberately because the institutions in which democratic structures are founded are non-existent. Let's start with the political party structure. The political party in Nigeria today, how are they funded? Who is funding them? Where do they get their sources of funding from? Such that we can audit their financial reports. Then we can begin to ask about the democratic process within those political parties on how candidates are elected, on how candidates are selected, that they will present for the nation to pick or select from. That is still an issue. As long as that is still an issue, then we have not yet perfected that democratic structure of electing people from a credible system. Our court is still barred with cases, myriad of cases and petitions within political parties, not even talking about the elections itself. So all of that is going on, and that cannot clearly communicate that we have perfected our act of progress ahead. You can have motion and not have movement. They are two different things. And progress can be relative, depending on who is defining what progress is and depending on the parameters in which the person is defining the progress.
Right. Okay. Indeed.
So, we must have made progress with sustainability,
right,
of sustain a set of people in power. But have we made progress with the quality of lives of people, quality of living? Have we made progress with the happiness index of the people that we say we are ruling, not necessarily that we are even leading, not to talk of where we are leading them to that we don't know yet?
All right, gentlemen, I mean, it's Boxing Day. I see we're coming really hard. It's understandable. We've had a very long year in Nigeria. In fact, a very long 23 years since we're going back to the start of the Fourth Republic. But maybe to step it down a bit, because I imagine that we've talked about this for so long, for as long as I can remember. And I can literally predict how the conversation will go. And it's understandable, again, because, again, you can predict the headlines. It's literally the same thing we're facing time and again. So let's step it down a little bit. And you pardon me for the sake of our viewers who are going through Boxing Day. And I'll start with Dr. Sobande. Two simple questions. And I had to do some research because there's some things we take for granted. We think we know it. It looks like we don't, and that's why we're not able to even properly measure where we are, what we need to do, and where we ought to be. So, who is a leader? What does leadership mean in the most simple sense? How can I identify who or what a leader is?
My brother did a good definition of what leadership is. Dr. Ojo started. My perspective to the word leader is that the word leader is different from leadership, and that's where the confusion comes from in our environment. One is a positional or occupational role. The other is a relationship where there's an agreement between parties, between individuals, between groups of people or a team of people, having decided on the direction where they are heading, having measuring standard as to the performance of the individuals assigned with the task to take them towards that direction, having rules and regulations guiding the functions of those who are tasked with the responsibility of taking us to where we are going. And like I said earlier, having a performance measurement standard to know, are we making progress? Then lastly, they also have binding obligations. Where you fail, you are let off the hook. Therefore, leadership in itself is a relationship between leaders and followers. And the leaders take authority from the followership. And the quality of leadership is determined by the quality of the followership itself. And where there is no relationship between these two categories of people, then there is no leadership. What we have at best is rulership. Because in leadership, you communicate standards, you communicate performance, you communicate expectations, you communicate direction, you communicate vision, you communicate goals, you communicate strategies. Where there are no indication of communication between these parties, then there is no leadership. What we have is rulership. And that's exactly the semantics has gone wrong all this while.
Interesting one there, Dr. Shobani. Just a moment. Interesting one. Let me bring in Dr. Ojo because I want us to go back and forth so we can get full value of both gentlemen. Dr. Ojo, so he says that, and I find it interesting, that leadership is actually meant to take instructions from followership, essentially. And he has defined that. But, I mean, introducing you, you are a strategic leadership consultant. And it just hit me. So there's actually leadership and there's strategic leadership. So it means that there can be leaders without what? Strategy, a plan. And I'd like you to come in there in addition to your definition.
Thank you for that beautiful question. You know, like I earlier said, I said leadership is getting results and serve. You know, if I want to define the context of leadership, you know, normally, most often when we're invited to speak, you know, we want to paint the negatives, you know, which is common with most people from our culture. Every society have their own issues. Issues are banned. Anywhere you see human beings, to manage power is a problem. So if I want to define leadership, you know, I was talking to one of my prof. In 2013, they wanted to write a book about Africa. And the two of them, one is from South Africa, a white South African and an American. And I was doing my doctorate then, and they asked me a simple question. They said, what is the greatest leadership problem that you have in Africa? I didn't tell them about corruption. I did not tell them about infrastructure because those issues are everywhere. I said the greatest leadership problem we have is the lack of love. So if I want to define leadership, from my own personal experience, having understood the culture, the cross-cultural, whether from the Anglo, Sub-Saharan, Confucian, and, you know, Dr. Toye spoke about rulers. You know, let me take us back to Middle East. UAE, Qatar, they used to be one country before. Saudi Arabia, our Islamic brothers, they are rulers, but they have strategic plans. They communicate well with their people. Sometimes they could be dictatorial. Even Singapore, first Prime Minister, he was dictatorial. There's some decision that you take that most people won't buy into them. But one thing that differentiates you from the people that you are leading is your ability to show love and empathy to them. You know, and that's where the problem is in our nation. Most people are in leadership position for what to gain, for what to benefit. It's not solely about service. You know, the news in our world today, everyone, they have dual passports, Canadian passports, you know, all those other passports. Does it solve your problem? If you have Canadian passport, you have a British passport, you are still from Nigeria. So it is better for us to look inward, fix our country from within. I normally cite an example with my students. I said, look at China, look at Hong Kong, look at Taiwan. They are under China, but they are different islands. We call some people ABC, American-born Chinese, American-born Indian. You know what they did? Because of their strong tie. They were born in America. Everything is there for you to aspire to. Good environment, good context. Right. But there's something they call patriotism that was transferred from their parents to them. That is the value system. To make sure that everything that you gain in this land that is developing, don't forget your first love. So the American-born Chinese went back to Hong Kong, went back to China to develop their country.
You know, interesting examples you gave, and I'd also like to hold on to that definition of leadership. Yeah. I smiled when you said it, which is essentially showing love. Yeah. Loving. Yeah. It's interesting, and I think maybe dictionary should have that definition as well. A leader is someone who shows love. Because I think about it, and it looks like perhaps something we're missing. Yeah. I looked through the dictionary to define leader for me. It says a person in control of a group or situation, a person who leads. I think that's Merriam-Webster. And I found something interesting. Something for guiding fish into a trap. Yeah. Maybe that's how a lot of Nigerians feel, really, because it looks like when you go for the election process and you choose someone, the next 4 years or whatever the term is, looks like, is this a trap? I just got into a trap. And I'd like to know, in that recruitment process, because that's also what you started by saying, it's a recruitment process. We're getting leaders. Yeah. And I'm glad Dr. Shobani has talked about leadership being a function of followership as well. So maybe what is missing so that the recruitment will not be someone being led into a trap, as that dictionary defined it?
You know, in 1999, when democracy came to be in this experiment, the best people in the room, they refused to participate. So we left the political space to permit me to use this word, the charlatan. You know, when we were in secondary school or maybe in primary school, you had the brilliant, you know, you left the political space for the charlatan. So all of us are now feeling the heat now because the system that they've created for a very long time is let me get to leadership, grab something, secure tomorrow of my children. No one can secure anybody's tomorrow. Don't let anybody deceive you. You have no power to secure anybody's tomorrow. You could get passport, 3, 4 passports for them. You can't secure tomorrow of them. So the mindset is, let me get a political position, secure tomorrow, get 2 or 3 passports, I'm fine. Anything that happens to my country, 0. It is a big lie. It is a big lie. Some of us, we have been privileged, is a call to be in Africa at this time, to make sure that we change the discourse.
You're not part of the Japa.
You know, we've passed through that level. You know, Japa syndrome is distinct. I am a bit biased to talk about it because some of us will be privileged to have been traveling for about 20 years. So I've passed through that level. I'm not a young guy to be running for protocol. But what I just wanted to say is
you
this.
Don't say that syndrome is new. It's not
new.
new.
Japa has been for a very long time. The Israelite Japa, the Chinese, they went, the Indian, you know, even in 1985, you know, my wife is a medical consultant, so most of the doctors there, my late mom is a nurse. All of them went to Saudi Arabia in 1985. Most people, they were young, they did not know history. Because of the economic issues in 1983-84, people left. But the Japa syndrome of today was caused by economic issues. People are looking for means to better their life.
It's always the case because even back then, I remember the campaign, the Andrew campaign of the NTA at the time. It was always Nigeria is our country. Let's salvage Nigeria together because things were that bad. If things were that bad then, that bad back then, I wonder what the 80s folks will tell us now. But Dr. Shobande, in the spirit of softening the conversation, as Kayode has said, I want to ask you this question. Now, since you have defined who a leader is, I know that you leadership pundits talk about different types of leadership. Situational leadership, transformational leadership, servant leadership, and all of that. In an ideal situation, especially for the young folks who are or will listen to this conversation and hopefully allow it to inform their choices in 2023, both for presidents and governors and other leaders. What kind of leadership should Nigerians be looking out for in 2023?
Thank you. First off, when we discuss leadership, I'm always saddened that we reduce it to political conversations. Leadership is not political issues. Leadership has much more to offer because there's leadership at the family level where a father provides leadership in his home. There's leadership at the institutional level where a teacher is providing leadership for his students. Leadership and politics are not the same thing. While you can find leadership activities in the political terrain, leadership cuts across all aspects of life. In the religious institution, in the business sector, in the marketplace, leadership can be practiced everywhere. And whilst we understand the practices of leadership, we will be able to understand what we require to recruit quality leadership at all levels. And that will significantly reflect on our political institutions. And there, we can now begin to determine what kind of leadership we want in our country. Like my brother, Dr. Ojo, said, we need a loving leader. We need leaders who will love people from their heart, who will feel the pain that Nigerians are feeling, and they will be able to communicate hope to Nigerians. That's the quality of leadership we need now. All those semantics of situational leadership, it was not a cultural context. It creates more confusion than it offers solution. By the time you start telling people we need a situational leader, our culture is transactional. Transformation cannot work on our value systems here because our value system is more transactional. When you go to our churches and our religious organizations, they give to God's service so that they can get God's favor. You can't build a transformational value or transformational leadership model on an orientation like that. So that's why I was excited when my brother said, oh, one critical factor of leadership is love. And it's correct. That is apt. And that is what has been missing in our environment. We need people who love people genuinely, who love Nigerians genuinely. We need a leadership that gives hope, communicates hope, that we know things are bad, but we can get these things right if you can cooperate. A leader whose communication will rally people around a common cause, a vision, a trajectory of a future that is desirable for everyone. And we will break it down in the simplest language and the simplest context that a 6-year-old child can explain it back to you. It will not be very, very complex. It doesn't have to do with a lot of big semantics. And I always say that our problem starts with the semantics of leadership. Because when people discuss leadership, the next thing we think is the political office holders. It's not necessarily that. So that's why I said, I'm always concerned when we reduce conversations on leadership to political activities or political events. Political deterrence is just a byproduct of the quality of leadership we produce. Let me give you an example. When we were growing up, our fathers will have 3 meat, 4 meat in the pot. The children, they will give us 1 meat to share, and we'll be looking at the fathers and we'll say, one day, when I become a daddy, I want to have 3 meat, 4 meat in the pot. What we have done is to provide leadership model that people have carried to the society, that my daddy is enjoying 4 meat in his pot now. When I get old and I marry and I become a father, my wife must put 4 meat in the pot. Now, the men take all these 4 meat, they develop pot belly, and they become very unhealthy. The money that they're supposed to spend to train the child in school, they spend it on the health of the father after he has been eating 4 meat every day, and he has developed pot belly, and he has now developed health complications. They fail to use that money to train the child and keep the man alive. That's exactly what is happening in our leadership structure. 75 to 80% of the resources is spent on the big guys at the very top, while the little resources is not being spent on people who will take over and help secure our future. We waste the resources. That model is exactly what is affecting the psyche of our people, that everybody is aspiring that Emilio, one day when I get there, I will also do the same thing. When I get there, I will also get my own share. That orientation that we have of misdefining leadership is what is determining our behavior towards leadership conversations in this country. Thank you.
Well, I imagine that, some things will certainly need to change then. And I wonder where you would be recommending that a change needs to happen. Because you have said that you are sad that when we talk about leadership, we always bring it to the political sphere, and then you give an example of what happens in the home, for instance, and how that is also translated or find its way into our political leadership. So it's very difficult sometimes to talk about leadership and divorce it from our political situation. I'm sure you'll appreciate that difficulty. But if you were to look at it at a more basic level, because I imagine that even those watching this program will be saying, you see, we need good leaders. We need good leaders. People rarely look at themselves and say, I need to be a good leader. But if you were to, break it down and to say, look, certain things need to change, because you've also pointed at our culture, where do you think we need to begin to engineer that change?
Let's start with our family value systems. Let's start with our family value system. The more we develop the appropriate values of kindness, of love, of consideration for the next person, then we begin to develop an aggregate component of that on our roads, where you become considerate of other road users, in our offices, in our businesses, in our church, in our religious institutions. When we institutionalize those values and make it a national culture, that we measure the standard of behavior of anybody and everybody at every level by those standards. What are those critical standards of behavior? There are some of them are in our national pledge. Some of them are in our national anthem. Honesty, justice. When we make that standard of behavior, it will make leadership very effective. It will make it easy for us to practice the basic tenets of leadership. Then we can begin to identify and recognize good leadership. It's simple, it's not complex. Just honesty, truth, integrity, justice for people. care, love.
But there are those who will say, oh, but I'm just a part of the body. I'm but a small part of the body, and that this change needs to happen more significantly at the head.
Yes, it's true. They can say that, but you know, when your toe hurts you, how do you feel? You have headache sometimes. As insignificant as you think the toe may be, or a finger is hurting, as insignificant as you think it may be, that the head is the important, that finger that is hurting can also give headache. For those who have done tooth extraction, as insignificant as the tooth is, that people don't see it all the time, but when you are in pain, it affects the head. The headache people get, that's exactly the way it is. It's an aggregate composition. It is just not something from the top. When God created the body and he gave us the head, he should have left the head alone and not give us hands and legs now. We should have just been walking around with just head. Everybody has something to contribute. We all have something to contribute with the quality of children we are raising, with the quality of students we are raising, with the quality of teachers that we are raising, with the quality of business managers that we are raising, with the quality of professors and lecturers that we are putting into our institution, with the quality of director generals in our various institutions managing our resources. It's across all levels. And we can't just do one part in isolation at the expense of the other. It's like a bad leg. When one leg is bad, you put all the strength on the other leg, and the other leg, the left leg becomes weak, then the right leg becomes very strong and powerful. You can't afford to do that. To balance it, it's just in the values. What do we value in that? What is the value of the average Nigerian life? How much does a Nigerian life worth to us? How much does a Nigerian life worth to those who are in governance, who are to provide security? How much does a Nigerian life worth to my neighbor? The good neighborliness, respecting people, honoring people. Those are the aggregate things that make leadership good and effective. If we don't talk about those aggregate things, those critical issues from the pulpit of our religious institutions, where we entrench those values into them, when we are preaching, we are praying, we are talking to them, so we don't abdicate responsibility and say, God will transform this country. God has been listening to our prayers. He's been answering our prayers. He has kept us all this while. But we also have a responsibility of good neighborliness, of love, of kindness, of being nice to other people, of being truthful, of ensuring we give justice to those who deserve justice. God is jealous about a country that protects the weak. When we look down on the weak and we don't give them justice, that God will fight for the weak. And sometimes he fights for the weak in such a way that it makes a collateral damage for even people who are not involved. And that's the reality. A lot of weak people are suffering. The injustice is too much. There's nobody to fight for them. The process for getting justice is weak. The process for getting a compensation is weak. All of that is an aggregate composition of the quality of leadership that we need to have. And it is in the values. It is in the values. We need to emphasize the value and measure the standard of performance of everyone in leadership position by those value systems. It's important. We can't run away from it.
A very, very, it looks very easy on the surface, but we know that even practicing kindness is not the easiest thing to do. So I would like to ask Dr. Ojo whether he thinks that there are ways to simplify it, because some people really do want to be kind. They really do want to be able to bear the burden of others. But in our climb today, you know how tough this is, how people have been jaded, and how sometimes people are considered naive when they try to go, maybe let's say above and beyond, or even just extend a little kindness. Now you kind pass, or how is it your burden? Or you just find out that maybe you're being taken advantage of, or maybe it's a little bigger than you thought you could bear. You live in Nigeria, and I'm sure that you've experienced situations like this. How do you, encourage people to continue to be their brother's keeper, at the same time be their brother's leader, or maybe their sister's leader, as the case might be, despite how difficult it is to do it?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dr. Soyi, to take it from where he stopped. I know leadership is, sometimes is very complex, especially in our culture, when you could sit down somewhere and be abusing people in that position. You know, leadership is not a position, mostly. It is what you are doing with the position. You know, I was reading a book about that Simon Kolawole wrote about politics and power. You know, his recent books about a compendium of his articles over the last 20, 25 years. And he was talking about 1989. Then we were just entering secondary school. And IBB dissolved AFRC, you know, the most powerful military council then, where the likes of David Mark, Oladipo Dia, you know, he listed all of them, Polomo, all of them. And there was a word that he wrote there. He said, leadership, position, political positions are transient. The people that were there yesterday, they've gone. The opportunity that God gives to you in a position of leadership is trust and to make their life better. But let me now bring it to the context of our culture. It's not only in Nigeria. If you go to South Africa, ANC, last week they just re-elected Ramaphosa. You know, the structure in South Africa is working because it was created during the apartheid. You could say apartheid was bad, yes, but the structure was created by the Anglo people, and that structure is still running. Though our black brothers, they are occupying leadership position in South Africa, but is the life of the average South African better? The answer is no. You come to Nigeria, you go to Kenya, you go to, even in the Caribbeans, you know, I emphasize this word very carefully. And I know we are celebrating Christmas. Christ came to serve. He gave his life for all. He made himself of no reputation. He was very humble to the end. He was very empathetic. He showed love. My counsel, what I just want to encourage our brethren, Nigerians, as we enter into 2023, very simple. I don't want to come and talk about so many things that are not working. I know things have been working. It might not be as what we all expected as a people. The work that we need to do needs to go back to our home, like Dr. Sobande said, value system. From the family system, value system. 2, service. If you want to elect a leader, 3 things is critical for anybody to lead well, whether in a complex society or a simple society. What is the vision? What is the vision of that leader? What has he done before? What is his capacity? What has he done before? Let us avoid these religious, ethnic biases. Those things that never solve our problems. I take us to the people playing football. Look at our Super Eagles. Look at there is merit. It might be from the same tribe, but the most important thing is that they get results. Can we make our leadership process like that? Let us get the best hand to pilot the affairs of our nation. No matter where we are, especially now in our world that things are so horrible, but I don't talk about negative, so I want to focus on the positive because there's an adage in Chinese. A Chinese person is somehow weak, but he does not talk about his weakness. He focuses only on his or her own strength. And look at China in the last 25 years, they've lifted how many people out of poverty? That is what leadership is all about. Moving people out of poverty, whether from the north, to the east, to the west, moving people out of poverty, solving the problem that we all face in our world. There are so many issues in our world today. The essence of leadership is basically service, trusted service, not the transactional one. Trusted service. Because we are too engrossed with this, what can I gain, what can I benefit? You know, in one of my books, the title of that book is Motive for Leadership. Why do you want to lead? You know, when we talk about trust factor, most people focus on integrity, your credibility, but most people forget that there is something they call motive. Why am I going into leadership position? Am I going for myself or I am going for others? The moment we shift it from ourselves to others, because self is destructive. No matter what you do, if you say, I want to do something, you hardly go far. But when you bring people together through love, most of the problem that we have is solved. You know, to go back to what I said, human being hardly handle power well. Even in the advanced world, Hitler was in power. They have a church, and they were killing people. People mix religion with so many things. Religion is the way of life. We have one God that we all serve. But the core values of godly values are the same. Whether you are a Christian, you are a Muslim, you are Hindu, you are Buddhist, you are Mao, you are Judaism, you practice Judaism. No matter the religion that you practice, love is love. Valuing human beings is the same. Honesty is the same. Kindness, empathy is the same. No matter the religion you practice. So as I appeal to Nigerians as we go into election in 2023, let us be cautious and also be involved. You know, sometimes we abdicate our responsibility to the people holding political office. It is not easy for them. If you find yourself in that position, you will know what they are going through.
So let's wind down.
Yeah.
It's been a very inciting conversation. But you talked about love time and again, and Dr. Shobande has agreed. Let's wind down on this. Can Nigerians go to the polls? Because you can't take away the elections. It's a recruitment process anyway. Can they go to the polls knowing fully well that they have at least one or more candidates to vote for? And I'm sure you follow the trends. One or more who actually has their love at heart. Can they go to the polls with that confidence from what you have seen from the candidates, their pronouncement and all of that? Can Nigerians rest assured that at least one or more has their love at heart?
You know, we have how many candidates? 18. But I know, apologies to other candidates, we have 4 major contestants. You know, one thing I just want to leave us with, because I hardly discuss politics, and, you know, I'm a strategist, so I work for them. So it's the same rule. Just follow the same rule and you get results. 3 things I want us to look at for out of those candidates. Who has the vision? Because sometimes we say the constitution is bad. Human being runs constitution.
So the vision?
The vision. 2, where is the, you know, look at the background, look at the family line, look at where the person is coming from.
And 3.
You know, who is he at home?
And 3.
And the 3rd one, because you can't do without hope, having hope. When you lose hope, you are not living.
Oh, well.
Let us anchor our hope because of the season that we are. That 2023, we usher in a new beginning for our nation.
Even though 33 years ago,
the same
Nigerians lost hope.
I think we should give Dr. Shobande 30 seconds also to respond to that one. Can Nigerians go to the polls with that confidence? Do you have that confidence from what you have seen so far, that in maybe at least one or more candidates have the love of people at heart?
20 seconds, Dr. Shobande.
I can't confidently say that. I doubt it. I can't confidently say it. Even Kayode, you asking me that question, you know that none of us can confidently say that Nigerians can trust any one of those people, and you can't blame them. Trust is an essential value in leadership.
But then, Dr. Shobande, we cannot lose hope. That's the only thing we have.
I don't want to be positioned as someone.
We're rounding off. I understand that the realities are, you know, stuck in our faces. So yes,
are not being realistic. I said it in time past that Nigerians should lower their expectations. I just pray that God should just help us. That's all.
Dr. Toye Shobande, Strategic Leadership Specialist, member International Association, and lead consultant, Stevens Leadership Consultancy, as well as Dr. Taiwo Ojo, Strategic Leadership Consultant and CEO Kish Global Consultants. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Part of our conversation this morning, gentlemen. We're back after now to take on another set of leadership. Stay with us.
Well, even if we wanted to run away from the fact that, you know, it's the political season, our commercial breaks wouldn't let us be, would they? Anyways, welcome back. We are turning our attention right now more into politics. We've been talking about leadership, and now we're going to be talking about why it will seem that we're only resting heavily on one leg when you talk about gender, and that is the male gender. Why is it that we're yet to fully utilize and the other leg, which could be just as strong? That's talking about women in leadership positions, women in politics. Why has it been very difficult to get more women into politics? And do we have any hope on the horizon for women who have been able to throw their hat into the ring? This morning, I'm with somebody who should know about this. She has campaigned heavily for more women to participate in politics and is asking more people to join, especially more women, to join the political bandwagon. Mrs. Eneobi is the convener, Nigeria Civil Situation Room, and also the country director of Action Aid. Ma'am, Merry Christmas to you, and welcome to the program.
Merry Christmas to you all too. Thank you for having me.
And we also have joining us via Zoom from Jos, all the way from Jos, Professor Fumi Paramalam, who is the Director of Studies at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Kuru. She's also Professor of Gender and Development Studies at NIPS and Development Consultant and Women's Rights Activist. Ma'am, Merry Christmas to you and welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Hi, Anna.
Oh, very unsure if she can hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I said Merry Christmas and thank you very much for having me on.
Great to know that she can, but I'm struggling to hear her quite a bit, so we'll see how we can work on that. Anyways, Ma'am, this is where we are. It's Christmas. I'm sure yesterday a lot of women were doing their thing in the kitchen. That's what we do, even though you will come the following day and, you know, look as pretty as you do right now. But we're talking about politics, and it's the season of politics. You have been also taking this very personally and asking more women to get into politics. Some people say it's a bit late now because the tickets have already been given or taken, as the case might be. Are you impressed with the number of women you see on the tickets of political parties?
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to all Nigerians. And thank you for having me at this time. Compliments of the season.
Same to you.
When you look at the number of the women at the ticket, it's just a little over 1,000 out of over 10,000 contestants. And so we cannot say that we are satisfied. But I think we need to look at it. Are women participating in politics, in the political process? If you look at the majority of the voters, it is women and girls. And when you look at the turnout,
do we have that as a fact now?
Yes, we do. Even in registration, you have more than 50% as women. And when you talk of the young people, you have over 60%. You know, and so when you are looking at the number of those participating in the process, in terms of contesting or being candidates, you can look at a very few women, but are they in the process? And what we are saying is, all along, you've been having women leaders who some of them have suffered, you know, issues of violence against women. When they see a woman coming up very strong, they feel threatened, and so a lot of things get to happen. But when you are counting those who are really in the process, if you want to divide and rule, you know, if they want to mobilize, if you go back to look at what happened during Christmas, most of those who are being, you know, the politicians are getting access, are trying to have access to, is women. Because they come with food items, they come with a lot of things, and when you are bribing a woman, you are bribing humanity. And when you're having less women in the decision-making room, what are you really telling women? What are you telling the people? We have a National Assembly that is male assembly. It's a male assembly. We have the House of Representatives. It's male-dominated. Only about 11 or how many do we have? About 12 women to 300. And, you know, when you're looking at 360 and you're looking at 8 in 109 in the Senate, you don't have the voices of women there. Are you telling Nigerians that women's voices are not supposed to be there? We have a number of houses of assembly where there are no women, and you have women committees. Who is supposed to be deciding? You don't wear the shoes, so you don't know what it is to be a woman. And so I think a lot of work has been done in terms of women participation, but we need to do a lot more. We need to change the strategy in terms of looking at women inclusion. Even when the bills, you know, came, they were thrown out as if, what are the women talking about? But I think we need to look at the numbers again. We need to look at it. The battle for 2023 for women, I would say, is lost. But it's not lost completely. There are some women out there who are contesting, and we're asking Nigerians to vote for them. And we're asking all women to mobilize around them and vote for them so that we can, at least at their own level, change the status quo. Maintaining that, but the work for 2027 should start. So that if we want to vote, if we want to have half of the candidates as governors, we encourage all women politicians to go out there and contest for the elections. And those who are not able to contest, some of us who are not going for the elected positions, should find the women who are going for it and back them up so that we can raise the status quo. But they are still in the process. Women are the ones who majority of them will be the ones to vote on that day. And so they are in the process. And I think paying lip service to the issues of women representation is really tiring and sometimes frustrating, I can tell you. Yeah. But because when you have the home, like you said, from the beginning of the program, you say women are doing their own thing with the festive season, whether it is the Christmas season or whether it is Salah season, you find out that in all of the seasons, because we worry about humanity, you want everybody to be fed, you want every child, to turn around good, and so we are talking of humanity here. Women's rights are human rights, because when they are not on the table, who takes those decisions? When there is unemployment, the children at home, they don't bother their fathers. They come back to their mother. And you watch your children helplessly. We're educating a lot and they're not having jobs. So we are talking of democracy that has the inclusion of not just women, but also persons with disability, and also young people and old people, having a generational transition, and also inclusion in decision-making.
Let me take this to Professor Paramalam now, because you've talked about strategy and how strategy needs to change. You say that, you're almost giving up hope for 2023, but you also say that all hope is not lost. Professor Paramalam, I wonder if you share Mrs. Eniobi's thoughts on that, on 2023. Are you happy with the number of women we see on the ballot, or should I say on the ballot? Roughly 1,000 from about 10,000 slots available. And what sort of strategy should we be changing if we're not happy?
Well, once again, good morning, and I hope you can hear me this time, and a very Merry Christmas to you. Can you hear me? Excellent. Okay. So yes, I certainly share Ene's perspective, indeed, and I would like to set her perspective of what she shared in global context. Nigeria ranks 183 among 193 countries surveyed by the Interparliamentary Union in terms of women's representation in parliament. That is right at the bottom. And when you come down to sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria is in the bottom 4 countries in terms of female representation in parliament. And that just shows you how bad it is, setting what she said in global context. Now, I also agree with her that 2023 is virtually lost. However, I would say that we still have the opportunity, and which should be a strategy, of strengthening, boosting the capacity, or the governance capacity, the leadership capacity of the few women who are already there in parliament and already hold different elective and appointive posts across the nation, from local government right up to federal level. And I think in planning towards 2027, we must begin at the grassroots. We often start, at the top-down approach. But I think we need to begin to train women, help women, assist women in constituency building, in building their constituencies right from the grassroots, right from the local government level. That's where our focus must be, so that we can build a groundswell, a critical mass of women supporters as well as aspirants and candidates who can, move forward to take leadership. But then we also have to look at systemic and structural issues. Very often we just focus on the women. Are they coming out? What is the nature of their participation? We need to look at some of the structural issues, such as harmful traditional practices, such as gender-based culture bias, things that inhibit women even in their psychology to make them, not even want to come out. We have to also deal with things like gender-based violence, which is a major structural issue affecting women's, whether their desire to come out or their ability to contest, in a level playing field. We also have to look at laws. Look at the electoral system, for instance. It does not favor proportional representation, either ethnic proportion or religious proportion or gender proportion. So we need to look at our electoral laws. We need to move away from a first-past-the-post system. We need to move to a more proportional system that favors, promoting the rights of women, young people, ethno-religious minorities in places of leadership. This will facilitate inclusion, and I think it will go a long way in strengthening women's resolve and their capacity to come out and contest for elections.
Well, one of the things that Mrs. Obi said is the fact that we need to support the women who have now come out. And I imagine as women's votes alone will not be able to, make them win. They're not going to be representing women alone, will they? They will be there in that position for men, women, and children. They'll be representing all of the constituency which they're supposed to be representing. But we're asking now that more women support female candidates. Should this be whether or not they're happy with the kind of candidate that has emerged?
That's a tough one, and it's a question that has been up for debate. Recently, we had a third women's national conference on this particular issue. And of course, the camp was divided between just vote for women because they are there, we need the numbers, and those who believe that, look, we need quality, we need competence, we need to vote for people who can actually deliver the goods. Now, my sister Ene, she favors, just putting women there because we really do need the numbers. And I sympathize with that position because honestly, the numbers right now are deplorable, with 8.2% in the Senate and 9.2% in the House of Representatives in terms of candidates that are aspiring to 2023. You can see that is quite bad. On the other hand, though, we don't want a situation where we reinvent the kind of politics that the men have promoted, which is largely a politics of incompetence. We do need people who can deliver on governance, who can deliver on leadership. Nigerians have suffered long enough from, bad leadership at different levels. And so we need to ensure that the women who get into positions of authority are women who can deliver the goods, not just for women, but for all Nigerians. And so I probably would think that we need to do much more on the issue of building women's leadership and governance capabilities at all levels, in all contexts. So yes, vote for women, but let us promote women who can actually deliver the goods.
Indeed. Let me take this to Madam Obi then, because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but as a female presidential candidate in the running out of the 18 of them. And I imagine that a lot of people, even women, do not know this. So I'd like you to speak to that point, because if there's meant to be a lot of support for any candidate, especially from women who, according to figures, make up about maybe 60% of the voting population at least, it should go to that female candidate naturally. But that's not the case. And that would be because a lot of people have freedom of choice. I mean, freedom of association. They choose to associate with whichever party they want to associate with. So maybe a two-pronged question. Do you expect that woman to get a lot of support, especially for the women folk, and also in pushing for these rights for women, especially the affirmative action, where we have a gender policy, but it's really just a policy? How do we draw the line between now infringing on people's rights, which they will express naturally for any candidate, and ensuring that women get the appropriate representation?
Thank you very much for the question. When we are looking at the issues of gender representation, we are looking at, even the Constitution of Nigeria. And one of the things that we're told at the National Assembly is that the Constitution says no discrimination. That there is no discrimination against women in terms of, they are contesting positions, they are picking up the tickets and so on. In the last primaries, I got calls from quite a number of women who were not allowed to even pick up the tickets, even when they have the money. And so we need to look at the kind of bullying that we're having on women. The issue, not just a kind of intimidation that is happening. You know, some of them were going for the Senate seat, and they did not allow them to enter the offices to collect the forms. And these are realities. So some of them is sexual, you know, harassment and intimidation, gender-based violence. A lot of them have encountered violence. If I tell you the rot of the kind of violence that they suffered, it's one for you to look at. We still have the case of, you know, Salome, you know, of Kogi State, the women leader for, you know, one of the parties. That was, her house was burned down, and they surrounded the place and ensured that she died in the fire. And up till now, we're having lip service to the prosecution. How can you have a crowd surrounding a home and nobody? Those people who were judged mentioned that they were sent. Have they been proven? And so the kind of sanctions and the lip service, how can you do that for a woman? She's only a woman leader. She's not even occupying anything that threatens anybody. So why is she a threat? The case of Kara Namoda, Kara local government, is still here. Victoria Chintex, a woman leader for Labour Party in that local government, was shot, and her husband was also shot. And so these are cases, there are so many cases of gender-based violence. When they are campaigning, they set them up and even remove everything they are wearing on their bodies and so on and so forth to ensure that they don't come back, and some of the team committed to them. You see, when we are looking at the gender bills, one of the contests is like, how can you have 8 women in the Senate, for example? And so all of the committees, who is representing what? I always stress, and I repeat, the quality of decisions that come out of any boardroom depends on who is in the boardroom, making those decisions. Representation is very important. You cannot stand on this, you cannot be in the shoes of those who are feeling the pains of what they have. How many times, for example, do men use the hospitals? How many times do they use it? How many times do women use the hospitals? Nigeria is at the 5 from the bottom in the world on maternal mortality. So even through this Christmas, so many women have lost their lives on the maternity death road. It's to continue the production, you know, to replace the workforce for the world. Why should we go that way? It's
a great thing that you've highlighted, you know, especially the plight of women who have lost their lives. I mean, the case of Salome, the PDP woman leader in Kogi State, and also Victoria Chintex, the Labour Party woman leader who was murdered recently in Kaduna. These cases are really, really, you know, cases in point that really point to some of the challenges that women really face. But for those who are currently in the race right now, who have, will I say, against all odds, they are in the race, they have been able to get their party's ticket, what would you say to them? And maybe some of them are even about to give up, you know, because of the challenges. What would you say to them to keep them going, and what will be your final word to Nigerians?
Okay, mine is that, you know, whatever you're doing, the fact that the women step out bold, no woman just gets up and go and pick up a ticket. They have gone through certain level. And I feel for their boldness alone, like somebody told me in the university, you know, for you stepping out to contest for Students' Union presidency, you have my vote. And so we should work with them. You know, let many of them go out and make their mistakes. So I believe that if any woman, I was having doubts about it until I met a Finnish woman, a Finnish ambassador then for the country that I was at the time. And the woman says, what we started in doing in terms of equality, if you see any woman on the ballot box, vote for her. We don't ask questions, we just vote, because it takes a bold woman and a courageous woman to go into the ballot box. And so I think for me, for Nigerians, I ask that you vote. I was asked whether, you know, what to do if I had, a woman presidency. We need to link up more to sustain their capacity. But if you want to look at the survey that is going on, where is a woman, where is the awareness on who she is, and all of that is still low, and people don't see what happens at those areas. But some women are going in for gubernatorial, which is for the first time. We might be lucky to have the first female, governors. And I think this is one of the things that we should be looking at. I want to encourage everybody to go out, but we also say, as the country and even the president, that he has a role for Nigerian women in terms of representation, because you have elective and you also have, selection, in terms of appointment. They are not appointing women. How many women are they appointing to, represent women in Nigeria?
So there's also that pressure as well. Yeah. I mean, whilst it is that we should be looking to get more women in office, are we applying enough pressure on, political leaders who are in executive positions to, ensure that they increase the number of women appointees in position? I want you to quickly, comment on that as you also give your last word to women who are currently in the race and could be facing one challenge or another. That's for you, Professor Paramalam.
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. We must also remember that there is a national gender policy in place. That gender policy is an official statement of intent, which means that government is duty-bound to have at least 35% of women in elective and appointed posts. Successive governments have not held their side of the bargain with Nigerian women. In other words, they have violated their social contract with Nigerian women. The social contract is that no matter what, in any position, there should be no less than 35% of women. And so I would agree with my sister Ene in saying that don't discriminate against a candidate simply because that person is a woman. Give women their fair chance of making sure that they are represented. There are so many problems that women have, ranging from gender-based violence to feminization of poverty to underemployment and unemployment, that the men are not addressing. And so women remain pseudo-citizens, second-class citizens in a country simply because they are not fairly represented. In terms of pressure on government, recently Nigerian women took to the streets, went to the National Assembly, and they set up camp there saying that enough is enough. And I don't think that they were given enough hearing. I don't think our voices were really heard as much as they should be, because it's actually unconstitutional to have less than 35% women represented in any elective or appointive setup. It's unconstitutional. It's a violation of women's rights. It's also a matter of injustice as well as lack of inclusion. So I will say in my final word that both government and the people are duty-bound to ensure that there is inclusiveness, there is unity in diversity, there is representation for all Nigerians, and that nobody should be left behind. And we need to build back better in 2023, 2027 by ensuring that more women are on the ballot, more women are there in governance. Thank you.
It's a fine place to leave it. Professor Funmi Paramalam, thank you so much for your thoughts this beautiful Boxing Day morning. She's the Director of Studies at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Kuru. Thank you so much for adding your voice to it. And to you, Ma'am NLB, thank you so much for coming to our studios this morning. She is the Country Director, Action Aid, and also the convener of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room. We'll take a break at this point, and we'll be back shortly. Maybe this time around we'll be able to discuss something less serious and let our head down, who knows? Stay with us.
Well, his real name is Daniel Walker, but you might know him as Dan the Humorous. Well, it's important to know that real name, especially when you want to sign the checks. He joins us virtually this morning from Port Harcourt. It's good to have you on the program. And we promised Nigerians it's a season of joy. So this is our Joy to the World package on Boxing Day. And you know, I was just chuckling before we came up. I remember some poster you put up some time ago saying you were running for a political office. And just before you came on, we're talking about women representation in politics. So why aren't comedians, entertainers pushing for some sort of representation in politics, affirmative action, if you may?
Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Marwa and gentlemen.
Go on.
Yes, so good to be here. Yeah. So, first of all, we are Nigerians before we are whatever it is we are professionally. You know, we are certain things, to aspirations, basically. So if you see a comedian trying to run for office, that's just a Nigerian trying to be a Nigerian, trying to do it.
Oh dear. Looks like Connection is trying to play a joke on us.
No, it's not. It's not a joke. For some it might be small crews, but you have some serious elements amongst us.
All right. So, let's talk about the business of the day. It's Boxing Day, Christmas. And I know for you, I'm actually a big follower of you. I know you always talk about what obtained then and what's happening now. And I wonder if much has changed. The Christmas of then, the Christmas of now. Have you noticed any change, something that perhaps may have piqued your interest?
A lot has changed. Particularly with the children of nowadays and our time. A lot. I was telling people last night in Port Harcourt here, our highest Christmas group back in the day was to go and watch Masquerade. To go and watch Masquerade. In Port Harcourt, I will call it Agaba, to go and watch Agaba. And come to think of it, it didn't used to make sense because there's a popular masquerade here, it's called Watam. And you will pay 50 naira, 100 naira back then to go and watch Watam. Only to wait for Watam to fall from the roof and start to chase everybody to flog you. I'm like, we are paying money for masquerade to chase us and flog us. But in this 2022 now, these children, they don't know masquerade, they don't know anything. They are by themselves Googling hotel, Googling resort, Googling things that will take hundreds of thousands away from your soul. that this is where I want to go. But Dan, and if you say, no, you can't go, they'll squeeze face.
Yeah, Dan,
I was saying, who are you to squeeze face for your father?
But Dan, there's something you can't take away from us now, right? Back then, now rice is commonplace. Then, you could eat rice 7 days a week now, but then you only ate rice during Christmas. So that's progress, right?
Well, if you look at it, it's not really progress, it's responsibility.
Really? Why?
Because then we are not paying the bills. But now we are paying the bills, it's touching us. But you made a very valid point because we used to eat rice and stew, particularly Sundays from time to time. But there's something about the stew they prepare that Christmas morning, not the night before. There is something about the fried plantain that morning. I don't know if it's the Hamatan or maybe it's the small thing Santa is finding us as he's flying through the hemisphere or something. But there is something about that rice. And the beautiful thing about us growing up then was that Christmas is the only time you could eat from your neighbor without your mother frowning. It's the only time they'll say, come on, hey. You won't need to look at your mother. Like, mommy, should I go? Should I not go? That one, free food for everybody. You go around. And for children like us, that was the only one time in the year where we would drink mineral, full bottle. Only us. We hold it from the base. Like this.
Oh, dear. I expect that Marco wants to come in on this conversation.
Right.
You still have to be careful. You still look at her to know whether you could actually drink the full bottle because you still have a number of visits to make and you cannot drink a full bottle, going around all of the visits. I'm loving your glasses this morning. I don't know whether it's because you're in Port Harcourt because it looks very similar to a particular type that we've seen on air several times coming from Port Harcourt. But, talking about comedians in politics. Talking about comedians in politics, some people will say, no, maybe comedians should just continue to make their jokes because looking at what's happening in Ukraine right now, maybe we shouldn't mix comedy and politics. It could become very serious. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say just like I was answering Kade's question earlier, comedy is a profession. It's a highly highly intellectual profession. The level of wit that we put in to put together our materials, our routines, you have no idea the work that goes on at the background for just one simple joke as it is, you know. So I see my job in equal standing with any other job, you know, doctor, lawyer, journalist, what have you, banker. We study. We have some level of training. So we go. There are books that we read on comedy, how to construct jokes, stand-up comedy, arts, breaking jokes, elements of jokes. Whatever joke you have, if I hear a joke, I can break it down. Do you know that in a joke, for example, there's a formula to it? You need to have your setup, you need to have your premise, you need to have
punchline.
your landing point, your punchline. The four of them, I can bring you, okay, this is the setup, this is the premise, this is the landing point, this is the punchline. There are rules in, you know, rules of three, you know, mathematical rule of comedy. So that being said, the man in Ukraine, well, I don't will do, or he's a comedian. He is just a politician, and they say man is a political animal. So that's a political animal just politicking, doing his thing, you know, and it's not because he's a comedian. Because if people that pay comedians know that when it comes to pricing their price, they don't crack joke with that one. So when you look at what some comedians bill you, you will know that they're not here for jokes. And the truth of the matter is, particularly maybe from 2027, you will be seeing a lot of us, you know, in the scene playing fully. I'm sure by now, some of you are shocked by some actors that you are seeing, and then when they are talking politics, you're like, oh, these guys are big politics, this, you know, talk, you know. So very soon you will see comedians, and you feel, and I must say that Zelensky, like, I mean, what a time to be president. Small time we all come enjoy president, drink champagne like everybody. Russia and knock you with war to show if indeed you are a leader or a true politician, or you are just there to do comedy. But the boy is trying. The boy is trying. And we're encouraging our other people to let them come out.
Dan, I must say that your work indeed is a lot of job to do, and it's good. I see that you recently even went back to school, got some extra certification, and there's a way to go. Perhaps you're preparing for that 2027, but there's something trending out these days. It's the political season, and one of your colleagues had a big show, Sabinos, and then it got quite political, and people thought, I mean, there's creative license, you have freedom to be creative and all of that, and also, especially the satirical angle to it. I mean, you're not just meant to crack jokes, you crack politically conscious jokes that essentially speak to the heart of issues in a very funny manner. So I don't know, how are you approaching this? Are comedians meant to be political or not, or just find ways to still do their thing and ensure that they contribute to building society?
So the thing about comedy is that, you know, leave politics aside, comedy must punch something. You know, we're talking about childhood now. We're talking about Christmas back in the day and now. That's referring to somebody's, let me use the coinage, Ajepako lifestyle or Ajepako past. For every joke you crack, you're speaking to somebody's life, you're speaking to somebody's lifestyle, you're speaking to somebody's exposure, you're speaking to somebody's perception. So when you're cracking jokes about whatever, you're cracking jokes about music, I could crack a joke and fault the lyrics of your favorite musician, for example. I could crack a joke and talk about the way your favorite preacher preaches and his style and bring out the humor in it, you know. The beauty about comedy is that sometimes we say the things that the people do not, are not able to say or cannot say or will not say or do not even, are not seeing it from the lens that we are seeing it from. So we have, I want to believe that we have the creative license.
Right.
And if you look at it, when it comes to satire, we don't really we just say it as it is. You know, that's how it is. By the way, let me even take this opportunity to make this point real quick in 4 seconds. When a politician does something anyhow, the next thing you see is open and saying, oh, that's a comedy something. He's not, comedy is a noble profession. Who do please.
So the joke is always on someone, and I see sometimes it's on the comedians themselves. Well, Dan, we have to run now. I mean, you can catch a lot of Dan online, on social media and all of that. He has lots of content. But thank you so much for sharing at least joy with us and speaking some serious talk as well. We'll be speaking with Dan the Humorous. He's a comedian, global comedian, I would say, not just here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning. Merry Christmas.
She'll say.
Well, shouldn't we be saying that's where a good place to anchor?
Yeah.
Because, hey, let this laughter continue and let this joy continue. Let nothing take it away from you, irrespective of the circumstances. That's the difference within happiness and joy. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful and joyful rest of your day.
And make sure to always catch your mom's glance before you collect that food. Right? I'm Kayode Kikilo. Have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Merry Christmas once again.